Many have welcomed this announcement with open arms, quite eagerly so, but on the ground, tangibly speaking, what does it mean?
Well, the test for success of this trade agreement, and any trade agreement really, will be the extent to which small, medium enterprises benefit. We have a market of $3.4 trillion combined, that is to say, consumer spending and GDP. So it's a very significant market. But we know that small, medium enterprises they continue to be on the margins of this market. So we have to take concrete steps to make sure that there's inclusivity of the benefits, that not only the large corporations benefit, but also that smallholder farmers benefit, the youth benefit, youth entrepreneurs in digital innovation. And we are already with our partners taking steps to make sure that we see the inclusive benefits of this significant market.
So the focus would be more on small to medium-sized businesses as opposed to multinational, huge conglomerates?
In the last 2 months, we adopted 2 protocols that take us in that direction of creating opportunities for market access, for new markets, new investment opportunities for young people, and also for SMEs that are owned by women. The large corporations really don't need us. A large corporation is able to access a new market in a matter of months. The barriers that they confront, large corporations, they're able to navigate around those barriers and access new markets and see significant returns in terms of margins on their investments. But it's not the case for SMEs. If you are a small, medium enterprise, you are in Kenya, you want to expand into Nigeria, the barriers that you confront can actually prohibit the market access that you seek. So we have to take concrete steps to make sure that we provide the ease of business connectivity, payments, ease of payments across borders, across regions, and we've taken steps to address and alleviate that specific challenge. And then also introduce digital technologies that enhance the capabilities of our small, medium enterprises to transcend regions and borders of the African continent.
You know, as I hear you speak of the ease of business connectivity as well, of course, as well the use of technology, we also have, you know, problems on the African continent. When you look at South Africa, for instance, when you talk about small to medium-sized businesses, they're struggling because of operational things that we can't keep the lights on. Yeah. We have no water coming out of our taps. So operationally, how do they even survive before they get to a point of being able to export and trade?
Well, as you know, I'm not able to speak for South Africa or on what is happening in South Africa. What I would say is this, that our experience is that across the continent, the biggest challenge is the cost of trade finance, the cost of money. So there may be security challenges, there may be energy challenges, but the biggest challenge that our SMEs confront is the cost of trade finance, first. Second, the bankability or lack thereof. So in other words, they don't qualify for the very, very expensive trade finance that does exist. And we have started the journey of tackling this problem. We recently signed a memorandum of understanding with United Bank of Africa, where they've committed $6 billion trade finance, up to $6 billion specifically for SMEs that will be trading under the preferences of the AfCFTA. They have already disbursed $150 million. More will be made available. And we are talking to our commercial banks across the African continent, including Standard Bank, including EcoBank, to make sure that we crowd in as much investment in trade finance as possible. The other challenges, of course, are at national level. We are not responsible for, let's say, things that are related to energy security. That is a national government sphere, which we do not interfere in it. But to the extent that there are challenges that are continental, that fall within our mandate, I've just mentioned trade finance, the difficulty of connectivity, of business-to-business connectivity, which we're addressing through technology, the difficulty of payments. All of these challenges, we certainly are taking action to address them.
And it's just a pity because there's only so much you can do. If you can't help the government resolve their energy crisis, even though that is going to be something that will affect particularly small to medium-sized businesses. However, let's talk about the potential of these kinds of deals as well. When we look at Africa, we're only standing at about 14% of our trade that we're using our inter-trade, whereas in Europe it's above 80%. So there's huge amount of potential here. Let's talk about that potential, but also when we'll be able to actually feel it on the ground. You know, monies have already been put into this, investments have been put into this, which is great. It's a step in the right direction. But we talk a lot about the jobs that it would create. When will we then be able to reap these benefits?
If we look at the experience of the European Union, the market integration experience of the European Union points to the fact that we're in it for a long haul, for the long haul. 72 years since the establishment of the European Union. And over that period, of course, it has experienced many, many challenges, including Brexit. So I think it's clear, in my mind, it's clear that it's going to take many, many decades. We are dismantling, you mentioned 14%, we are dismantling over 70 years of colonial economic trade patterns, over 70 years of trade patterns that the result is a 14% intra-Africa trade that you correctly point to. Because the nature of Africa's economy, the nature of Africa's infrastructure is directed historically to service colonial economies. So we have to start from somewhere, dismantling this very, very well-established network and pattern of trade. So that's going to take time. That said, young people across the continent, and I have the honor and the privilege to travel the length and breadth of the continent, young people are very eager to export their goods. So for example, last year we were in Kenya, where we witnessed smallholder farmers exporting their value-added agricultural products, tea, exporting that tea to West Africa. We were in Egypt and saw exports of manufactured goods from Egypt to Cameroon and to Ghana. You will remember at the end of January, the President hosted us here with ministers of trade, with African ministers of trade in Durban, when we saw exports, again, of manufactured goods from South Africa to Kenya. So we are starting somewhere. We've got to start somewhere, rather, because we are up against a very, very well-established historical colonial trade pattern. But I believe that we have made the right steps. We've made the right steps. 47 countries out of 55 have ratified the agreement establishing the AfCFTA, signaling a very strong commitment to eliminate barriers not only to intra-Africa trade, but also to intra-Africa investment, which is less than 4%. So we have a very, very significant challenge ahead of us. But the difference between now and any other period is that there is unprecedented political will, there is unprecedented legal commitment, because the continent of Africa realizes that unless we integrate our market and become competitive, we will forever be on the periphery of the global economy.
And what do you think has actually sparked that greater will, that greater desire to make sure that this actually happens? Because Africa has had sovereignty and independence for decades now. What do you think has taken so long, and why did we finally take that plunge?
Well, there have been, I mean, since the establishment of the OAU in May 1963, if you look at the founding documents, it's very, very clear that the objective must be market integration. But to your point, nothing has happened really except maybe in 1980, the adoption of the Abuja Treaty, which sets out the timeline for Africa's integration, the Lagos Plan of Action, but nothing this concrete in scale has been undertaken. I think in a wake-up call really for all of us, not just the political leadership in the African Union, but all Africans in general, the COVID-19 pandemic The fact that in April 2020, only 3% of Africans were vaccinated, and also the fact that the disruption of global supply chains resulted in Africa losing over 35% of its export markets, primarily to the European Union. And all of these things combined with the geopolitical context, the emerging geopolitical context, compels us to think very, very deeply about the state of the world and where Africa fits in that state of the world, in the shifting geopolitical and geoeconomic considerations. And it's clear to us that to enhance our self-sufficiency, we have to look inwards without disconnecting from the global economy, because that would be ill-advised. But we must look inwards. So, for example, the establishment of regional value chains in areas such as pharmaceuticals, in agriculture. Pharmaceuticals industry is a very, very important part of Africa's economy. We import over $16 billion annually, and yet we have the productive capacity in Africa. So these are the two events that compelled us to be very reflective about the state of Africa, given the current shifts in the geopolitical and geoeconomic context. And
speaking of that, current geopolitical context, when we look at the shift, you earlier mentioned BRICS, for instance, Brexit as well. There has been this shift by the Global South. There has been this shift to kind of steer away from over-reliance on the West as well. That must have prompted this and pushed this even more in the right direction. But from those conversations that you're having with young people across the continent as well, who are eager to export their products as well, are they also mentioning these sentiments of what's happening geopolitically?
I think there's a general awareness. There's a general awareness of the impact of the geopolitical context and the geoeconomic context. So, for example, Africans know that the reason we are experiencing a low-intensity food insecurity crisis is because of the war in Ukraine. That has had a materially upward impact on inflation. So inflationary pressures caused by external factors to the African continent. People know that this is a problem, and we've got to address it, which is why we, again, have to look at Africa's import bill, over $50 billion. We're a net food importer, $50 billion annually, and yet we have the grains that we import, we have the rice that we import, we have the soya that we import, we have the maize that we import. So we have to tackle and dismantle those pre-colonial trade rules that prohibit intra-Africa trade in basic agricultural products to enable us to address this food insecurity crisis and to reduce the cost of food on the African continent. So this is just an example of the level of awareness that there is about the geopolitical context, its impact on Africa, and the possible solutions that we can deploy to address this challenge.
Mr. Mene, just before I let you go, on a practical level, you gave those anecdotes as well of a business owner in one part of the continent now exporting tea to another part of the continent. If I'm sitting at home listening to this conversation and I have a great business and I'd like to tap into the markets of one of these 47 countries, perhaps it is tea, perhaps it's furniture, clothing, whatever it may be, how soon are we able to do that now? When are these colonial structures and the laws going to be shifted?
Well, if you are in South Africa is already part of the free trade area. There are goods that are being exported and imported by South Africa under the preferences of the AfCFTA, which means that if you are an exporter of furniture, you want to export your furniture to Gabon, you will get the preferences of the trade agreement. So it is actually something that is happening as we speak. It is not something for the future. Trade is happening under the preferences as we speak. Of course, the national level or regional level businesses have to work in the case of South Africa, with the Department of Trade and Industry, for advice about accessing specific markets, the reduction of preferences that you will receive, the applicable rules of origin, all of these things, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition will be able to advise any business, whether large corporation or SME.
Well, it's all very exciting news, and we really appreciate you joining us in studio.